Thank you so much. I am completely amazed at Amy and her whole team. They have done such a lot of work behind the scenes. And so if you guys can just stand up really quick, a round of applause for the volunteers, all the volunteers. Yes, thank you. Oh, that's okay. They deserve it because, look, it's a lot of work to put this together. We've been working over a year to put this together. We have 37 cities across the world in 24 countries. We got 9 new countries this year. Switzerland, Turkey, it's just amazing. It's so much fun. So there's a ton of content that you guys can tap into after this. And we'll be helping you find the links to all that on the Ustream and videos, and we'll make sure that you have access to that because there is quite a bit of information and an amazing amount of speakers. Thank you. Is that better? Okay, today I'm going to be talking to you about dysfunctional design. And it's actually a very optimistic talk. Where I'm talking about how we can create happier human interaction between designers and developers. Now, this actually applies to anyone on your team, but from my background, I'm just going to draw in a few stories, and I'm going to highlight a few things that I have learned along the way so that you don't have to experience that pain, and you can have a happier design process. And then I'll just wrap it up with a few takeaways. I'd like to start with this quote from Ophelia in Hamlet. Not sure if you are familiar with it. We know what we are, but not what we may be. So a lot of us feel like we're pretty self-aware. We know ourselves pretty well. But I think there's always room for growth. And especially when you have a lot of different personalities that you're working with on a team. I think I was talking to some people over there about that each team kind of differs. And my background comes from corporate Fortune 500, also my own consulting firm, and also working with advertising agencies. Those are all very kind of different scenarios. So, basically, it can be heaven or it can be hell. And we're trying to make it more like heaven. And so there are those situations where some kind of dysfunctional aspects come into play while you're in that design process. And I totally believe that if we can improve the process and the design process with all the teams, if we can make that a little more enjoyable, it's really going to affect the outcome of the product or service that you're trying to create and design. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is based on a little bit of what Seth touched on, which is cognitive psychologists Janet Metcalf and Walter Mittis came up with these 2 distinct cognitive systems. And they're pretty basic. I mean, really it comes down to hot and cold. And so hot is when it's very reactionary, like heat of the moment, and you're having this strong reaction. That can be for a number of reasons. Or cold, which is more deliberate, self-controlled. Kind of like one person told me, use your Top Gun voice. And so in the heat of a moment, just really being aware of how you're reacting to that other person, and you can communicate with a sense of urgency, and you can be clear without kind of offending the other person. So there's a lot of different things if we're just a little more proactive and aware, and also aware of how they are reacting to things. I mean, these cognitive psychologists have broken it down. We have cognitions, we have our behaviors, and then we have our reactions between people. So that's kind of what I'm getting into. So there's this book that I really like. It's from Patrick Lencioni. I'm probably not pronouncing that right. If anyone's Italian, you can correct me. And it's called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It's fantastic. It's a really good read. And so I'm not going to go into everything in that book, but I like this photo because they're all like trying to have that shared common purpose of staying on the bike, but it's not exactly easy, is it? So the first dysfunction I want to talk about is absence of trust. Now, there's a lot of different ways that trust plays into a design process team, right? A lot of it's invulnerability. So if you're able to just say, kind of recognize if you make a mistake and say, oh yeah, that actually doesn't work so well. I see what you're saying. Let's change that. That's building trust, right? Or if you are working with someone and they're kind of hiding some information, maybe it's political, whatever, then you have another issue of trust within your team, and that trust can really break down the design process. It really slows things down, and it makes creates additional hurdles where you just really want to enjoy what you're designing and create something excellent, right? So, fear of conflict. How many of you are out there a little like you don't want necessarily like love conflict? Yay, conflict. So we're not really, a lot of us, I would say probably most of us, stay away from conflict. We don't want to encounter that, right? And so we have this artificial harmony, and that creates kind of this tension, and it grows and it grows, and it kind of just weighs on us. And then everybody knows it, but no one's talking about it. And it just creates an environment that is not open for design. You're not really able to challenge your colleague and say, hey, is there a different way that we could approach this? I kind of was thinking about this. What do you think about that? And really have that open, genuine, and authentic conversation. Then you also have lack of commitment. That one sounds a little strange. You would think that a lot of people are committed, but if you've worked in groups, if you've worked on teams, you know that varies. There are some people that put in more time and effort. There are other people that put in less. So when you look at the level of commitment, you don't want to have any ambiguity when you're in a process. You want to make sure you know exactly who's responsible for what. You want to make sure that they own it and that you can rely on them to own that part of it. The fourth dysfunction I want to talk about is avoidance of accountability. And so that's just pretty much owning it. And so a lot of people in teams sometimes don't necessarily want to take accountability. They'll say, oh, that's that team. Oh, yeah, so-and-so, the stakeholders, they just won't listen to us, or whatever it is. So there's different ways that that can come out in a dysfunction, and what happens then is you kind of lower your standards overall for the design that you're trying to create. So we definitely want to take accountability for ourselves. And again, that kind of goes back to that authenticity. The fifth dysfunction I want to talk about is inattention to results. And this one is, it kind of goes to a little bit of status and ego. And so if you think something should be done in exactly a certain way, and you're just standing firm and you're not open to that, you're more interested in your own personal goals and interests as opposed to being interested in the team's goals, right? A lot of incentive programs are based on individual goals for just that person, not the team. And I think even that structure is something that we can look at changing, because if we're working more as a team with that shared goal, we can avoid some of that. So what I'd like to do is just tell you 3 stories. Like I said, it comes from a variety of different things. I'll share a little my own pain with you, my own learnings, and kind of refer back to that pyramid that Lencioni talks about in his book, and what things can exist. And I think if we can be more aware and conscious of this, more mindful of these things and what the dynamics are happening in our design process, we can really improve that. And again, don't we all want to be happier? Don't we all want to create a really good design process? So the first story is called Drive Through. So this is a story where we were working on a sales software problem. And a requirement came in to go fix this. And so our development team said, okay, give us the order. What are the requirements? And we were like, wait, we want to talk to you about this. We want to have a discussion with you. We want to hear what you have to say. And he just said, just give me the requirements. That's all I want. And I thought, oh, this is not like an order taking thing here. It's not about like, here's an order, go take it. Like, you have amazing expertise. You are extremely smart. And what is actually happening here? What is wrong? And the problem is, and I think that Karen might have mentioned this, is bringing that person into the process earlier and bringing that development person in earlier, where it's kind of like, oh, it's always been done this way. And so he's just kind of taking orders. So we changed the culture. It was not easy, but we said, how do you like to work? We want you in that design team 3 weeks ahead of when you get that order. That way you're part of the decision making, and you might be able to say, here's a more efficient and better way to build this. And then the designer says, well, yes, but let's just tweak it like that. You're going to have a much better end product if you bring that person in earlier. But sometimes I think what we have done is we haven't given the developer a voice. We just kind of go status quo, but we need to go beyond that. And we say, yes, you do have a voice. You have a voice way earlier in the process. We want you to be part of that conversation. And you know what happened? He became one of the biggest UX advocates in the company. And the question he asked for everything we started is, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And Neil and I were talking about that. What is the problem we're trying to solve here? And that's kind of where we started. So that was really fun. Well, not fun, but it was hard. But at the end, it was just really satisfying to have a more collaborative team process. So we gave the development team a voice, and also the development people, they, use your voice to say, hey, I want to be involved earlier. And then, inviting the teams to join the process earlier. So going back to those dysfunctions, there was a little avoidance of accountability, where it was kind of status quo, and it's like, I'm just going to do it this way. Lack of commitment, where, the design team was rigid in kind of how they had done things. So it was just expanding that a little bit more. And then the fear of conflict, just, some development people, well, in this case, he was kind of introverted, so he just kind of was a little bit shyer to bring in an alternate point of view. And we said, no, we want that. We hope that you will do that. The second story is about templates. It should say story number 2. Sorry about that. I was having trouble counting when I went from LA to Florida. Anyway, so the second story is about templates. And there's a lot of bootstrap templates here and there. And that can stifle creativity, but it doesn't have to. So we really have to think as designers, how are we going to still keep it creative and unique and personal and meaningful By using a template. Well, there's some pretty powerful CMS systems that work on modules and components, and I'm glad that Karen showed some of those wireframes, because that basically kind of shows you like each section can be reused on the site in different places, right? And then they have CMS systems now where you can pull up relevant contextual information based on a specific persona. It's really amazing what's happening here. But the problem is, as a designer, it's a little uncomfortable because you feel like you're losing a little bit of your creative freedom. And, oh, everything's in a grid, it's in a box. Well, it doesn't have to be. And so there was this story in particular was about basically, this module has to be the same on pages 1, 5, and 15. And okay, I understand that increases the developer's efficiency time. He only has to create one module that will be used 3 places. But guess what? Page 5, that absolutely does not work. We found in our user experience research that page number 5 has to be different. So we're going to give you 2 versions of this module. And the developer saying, no, I don't want to build that. That's more time. And we said, too bad. So it's just kind of like you push where you need to push back, where it really makes a difference. But then for another module, whatever, maybe it makes sense to keep the same thing. So you really have to pull on your research, your knowledge, your expertise to be thinking not only from a design perspective, but also to understand the process of the developer and the programming, so that you have a little more understanding of where they're coming from, and you can kind of meet halfway. So design collaboratively, and basically if you have the end goal is shared, you want an excellent experience, but you still have to weigh out all those things of technical effort, time, cost, all of that good stuff. And so again, I've just highlighted some of the dysfunctional things that have happened in this story. I got my 5 minutes, so I'm going to try to talk a little faster. The third story, this is actually number 3, is numbers only. And developers love numbers, and so do stakeholders. Data-driven decisions are comfortable. They're solid, they're real. But if you're doing UX research and you have qualitative research that's open-ended questions that might really have an impact on time, cost, and all of that side of the design process, that could get uncomfortable. So this one is more going towards user testing, and not just guerrilla user testing, like real user testing in an agile environment. It can be done. I've done it with many projects. Do not skip the research. Don't just go to Starbucks. Get your real personas. Do it right. We can talk to you more about that later. But analytics doesn't do it. You have to match analytics with the user testing. So do your research. Make sure you're doing both. Do not just look at the analytics. That's what's happening. It's not telling you why it's happening. So again, my slides are going to be available just like everyone else's. This is just a quick thing about learning to ride a bike. When my daughter was trying to learn to ride a bike, the neighbor said, okay, first thing we're going to do is learn how to fall. And we were just like, what? And they said, yeah, then you won't be scared of riding the bike. You'll know how to fall. And so that's kind of my point to this whole thing is, expect to fall. Expect that you're going to have some tough things coming out of this. So I know it's really quick here, but setting clear expectations with a kickoff meeting. Who is doing what? Who's responsible for what? And how do people like to work? Ask those questions. Make sure you're explicit. Identify and align your shared goals. All of the goals, business, design, creativity, and then align them. Which ones are really clashing, and fix that before you start the process. Expect conflict, get ready to fall. If you're ready to fall, it's not going to hurt so bad. And you can really, just as one of my last points, is really just separating task conflict from relationship conflict. So task conflict is anything more related to the design process. What are you trying to achieve? So, if you're having a conflict within, I think it should be designed this way, and you think it should be designed another, that's a good conflict. Relationship conflict, that's unproductive and in the design process that needs to be handled differently. And then back it up with data and research, numbers plus research. And then just model relationship or leadership. If you are more self-aware, if you're willing to be vulnerable, then you're going to model that to others, and you're going to show the design team a different way to work. So it really, it comes back to us, and when we can use that objective comparison to say, here's the reason, here's my rationale for why we should make this change, and back it up with the data and the analytics to show that, and to not make it anything about politics or relationships. So really, design needs to be plugged into human behavior, and design dissolves in behavior. That is a quote from Naoto Fukasawa, which I love, and that's like a cool design. It's available at MoMA. But anyway, it's just talking about design and behavior are totally intertwined, and it makes a big difference. So thank you so much for your time today here. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you very much.
We have time for 2 questions. Oh, we have, okay. We have time for more questions than that. Sorry.
Okay.
So anybody have any questions?
You gave the 3 stories as if they were independent of each other, but aren't they also complementary? Each of those stories exist in all teams at all times. They're not standalone.
Exactly. I mean, again, I've done corporate work, consulting, and agency work, so I just brought in some different scenarios. So it really doesn't matter where it's coming from. All of those things can happen within the same team. Hopefully not all of them are happening, but I just wanted to highlight like some specific examples to help us. Again, I think when you're just more proactively aware and then modeling that leadership, that whole design process is going to improve, and then you're just going to be happier while you're designing and while you're creating things more collaboratively. So yes, you are right.
Super power-packed presentation, thank you.
Thank you.
My question has to do with IA at the federal level and at the state level. Where is that going? What I mean by that is we have, for example, some states have a Secretary of Education, and some have this and some have that, various divisions. Is there any word out there to try to get this into our government?
There is actually, I think it was Karen mentioned Dana Chisnell. She was doing work with another colleague on how to improve the voting process. And so they broke down all the information architecture of what is the data we're collecting, how is it organized, what's the taxonomy and the labeling systems, and then they did research and finding out, okay, we all know the little punch hole story, but basically finding a better way where it can be very clear and people can understand exactly what they're voting on and making the right decision. So with that particular example, she is actually working in the White House now. So it is becoming more well known, and World IA Day itself is a way that we are making IA more well known. UX is kind of sexy, trendy. Like a lot of people know what that is. Less people know what information architecture is. So hopefully you guys can be evangelists for that and really talk about it as a solid foundation for any design that you're building. It's not just about a sitemap. There's a lot more to the navigation systems and the structural framework that you're setting up for any design process. So, hopefully you can be an evangelist to further that even more.
It's an issue of I think it's called, open government or transparency. I mean, if there's ever a marriage between IA and transparency, come on.
There you go. Whoever needs a job can start that up. That's a big task though. So I hope that we will see more of that to come.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Hi, my name's David, and Neil kind of jumped on my question just a little bit. I have some experiences with institutional customers, internal customers, big, Fortune 500, and of course government. I have a background in government at the federal level primarily. And even the way the channel shops through requests for proposals and whatnot for vendors to do stuff for them, the way these things are specified. For instance, my last large employer had systems that required a cut and paste from one application to another because nobody would make the applications work together. And not only did you have to manually cut and paste these things from one to the other, but you had to manually change them each time you went from one application to another. Management was not even didn't seem to think it was important enough to avoid all the mistakes and the expenses involved in even coming up with a clipboard application that could do that. This was on a Windows XP at the time. I fought a lot of fights in that company to try and get these simple, flagrant incompetencies, systemic incompetencies in the IT infrastructure fixed. All to no avail. And this is a private company. It's even worse within government organizations, which are notoriously bureaucratic.
Yep.
and set in their ways. So for me as a developer at this point, that is an untapped market that is untapped simply because the market refuses to acknowledge itself. Any advice on
Right.
that?
I do. My advice is break the rules. So, I mean, when you're in a corporate bureaucratic situation, I mean, that's what I did. I just went and did the research with or without them. I'm not waiting for approval. I just go do it. Just go do it and then bring it back and say, I can't wait to show you what I found. Brown bag lunch it or whatever. So I don't know. For me, I don't always wait for approval. I just say, we're doing it, and then I bring it back. So I think you have to be creative because you might not have the funding to do it. But you have to just figure out a way to do that. You can put a Craigslist thing and try to find a user and send them a $10 Starbucks card, whatever. I mean, seriously, there are ways to get users to give you feedback. And if you put together a methodology and a test that you can then bring back that executive summary, then you're going to be able to share with them something new instead of like continuing the fight. You'll bring out something new for them. It's not easy. It's definitely not easy. There's so many heavy politics, but I think you just keep trying to find ways around it. When I was in the corporate situation, I always said, we really work for a circus. We're jumping through these hoops of fire, even for these little tiny things that need to be approved. So I have a feeling that's probably what you're doing. But so figure out a way to do the research, show them what your real users are saying. And also, I mean, in that case, it just seems like you can show the cost savings. And if you could show, and which you probably already did, but with the systems, there's so many amazing systems out there now where you can avoid so much of the manual labor on migrating something over. So I would just you know, I don't know if you can do RFPs on better systems, but also, yeah, break the rules.
Okay, one last quick question.
Thanks. Thank you. There's a very thought-provoking presentation. It strikes me that the kickoff meeting would be a great venue to, even with a team that's worked well together, to sort of refresh them by giving them not the actual project at hand, because that's too loaded with status and all sorts of issues with who's all the various people in the team. But are there any exercises available, sort of in printed or online format that you can use for a team as a kickoff meeting, where you go through as if it was a real project, but then with guidelines for, let's call the person the moderator, to
Right.
then observe and spot where classic things are occurring and step in and sort of guide the team to recognize where they're falling into some, let's say, bad habits. And so basically get the team sort of energized to be thinking in a collaborative way. Are there such sort of things out there?
I have my own template that I have my team use. Any project has to have a kickoff. So I'll just, when I share everything with Amy, I'll put that template in there for you. And just don't skip it. That's the time to get excited about the project. And here's what we're going to do, and here's why it's meaningful. And this is why everybody together is going to make this thing great. And here's all the roles. A lot of times that's skipped. If you have that, you're going to energize your team. You're going to get them going. So yeah, I'll be glad to share that template with you. And it's just higher level goals that you want to achieve, who's doing what, and then a process of meetings. I mean, scrum meetings or whatever you're doing. But I think that's something that's skipped, and it should not be skipped. It's a big deal. And it really, if you're the leader of the team, it can really motivate them to stay on track for what their goals are. But also it's encouraging that collaboration between all the stakeholders, the developers, the designers, marketing, IT, kind of everyone, having everyone in that same room just to get it going, or even online, webinar, whatever. Just don't skip it. You get to have that contextual part of it. So yeah, I'll be glad to share that. Thank you.